Allahu Akbar.
So, I am sweating like a sow during menopause here due to the damn heat outside, but I'm still gonna do my very best to kick off my new video series that's gonna be about the assholes who are making it easier for Islamists to spread their radical Islamist garbage in the West. And who would be better to start off with than Miss Anita Sarkeesian? So Anita Sarkeesian is a self-described feminist media critic who made this rage-inducing video series called Tropes vs. Women in Video Games, in which she just shows herself to be completely clueless about anything regarding games. As a longtime fan of both video games and booty, her videos were complete cancer to watch, and she just exposed herself to being this kind of gamer who would say, "I love Zelda, he's my favorite video game hero."
For the purposes of this video, I tried to get a glimpse of Batman's rear end, but it's as if his cape is a high-tech piece of Wayne Industries equipment designed to cover up his butt at all costs.
So the last time I heard anything about her, she was still frantically sucking the victim nipple, and I honestly thought that we were going to be spared from more of her bullshit. But here we are again, and she's going to explain to all of us how we should feel about Muslims being portrayed in movies and video games. And you know me, when you start victimizing these poor Muslims and defending Islam, because I promise you that you will, well then I'm gonna be all over that like a fly on rotting meat. Okay, let's see what she has to say.
Is the crowd dispersed now?
No, they're still out there, but unarmed. They're just chanting, you know, standard death to America stuff.
From True Lies to American Sniper, from 24 to Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Western media is full of images of evil brown people who need to be wiped from the earth by noble, righteous white men heroically fighting for freedom and justice.
Oh my God. They found me. I don't know how, but they found me.
What? Back to the Future? Even that beloved comedy classic takes a moment to toss in a few scary brown men to menace and terrorize our white heroes. Unfortunately, we can't hop in Doc Brown's DeLorean and undo all the harmful representations of Muslims, Arabs, and Middle Easterners that have haunted our stories since, well, basically since the Crusades.
People in the West have had an issue with Arabs since the Crusades. Really. You would have expected people to have gotten over the Crusades, but apparently whenever an Arab Muslim gets thrown into a major Hollywood production, the white Christian viewer then clenches his fist in his pocket and grinds his teeth. This is news to me.
Okay, maybe that's not entirely fair. In some ways, things have changed. Once upon a time, non-white actors could hardly get any work in Hollywood at all. These days, shows like Homeland and movies like Executive Decision are providing some brown actors with ample opportunity to portray scary terrorists who get gunned down while screaming something absurd like "Death to America."
Well, first off, a Middle Eastern terrorist screaming "Death to America" isn't an absurd thing for him to scream. And yeah, racial typecasting does occur, an astute observation by Miss Sarkeesian. And yeah, Arabs very often get cast in roles as terrorists, but Anita most likely doesn't care about, for example, the staggering amounts of white men who always get cast in the role as the bloodthirsty psychopath or sex offender.
Don't you have any friends?
I have friends.
A pretty girl like you should have a lot of friends.
In movies, white men in general are to a way higher degree compared to any other race cast as school shooters, sexual predators, and serial killers. And don't tell me that isn't racially motivated, because it sure as hell is. The movie Terrorist gets played by an Arab, and the movie character that is, for instance, a pedophile, he will be cast as a white, very often middle-aged man. If we don't count black or Latino gang members as being serial killers, which many in practice are through drive-by shootings and by committing other nastiness in movies, well then the typical serial killer when it comes to Hollywood is white and male. And it's because the majority race in the West is white, and men statistically commit more violent crimes. And it's also based a bit upon reality, because we've had white men like Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, Edwin Kemper, David Berkowitz, Ed Gein, Dennis Rader. So when it comes to portraying a bloodthirsty psychopath disguising himself as your friendly next-door neighbor, well then of course the white male actor will be handed that role with extremely few exceptions, and It is a role which has been handed to white men based in part upon reality. But you, Miss Sarkeesian, you don't care about stereotypes in movies depicting whites, especially white men, as natural-born killers. So lay off your infantilizing favoritism as soon as it's about Arabs getting shit flung at them. We all get branded in movies.
It doesn't even matter if you're not actually of Middle Eastern descent. If you're vaguely brown, you can stick around to play bad guys.
The people that you should worry about kidnapping you while you're abroad or blowing up a cafe with you in it most often are not white. This isn't because they racially have some natural inclination to kidnap people or blow themselves up. It's due to the political and social problems that exist in a lot of Arab countries. It's a realistic depiction of the way people tend to look in areas that are overrepresented when it comes to being the nation of origin for different terrorist groups. It comes down to a choice between if you want realism or if you want political correctness. We could have Icelandic terrorists if that would make you feel better.
Now sure, not every Middle Eastern character in films is a villain. In the 1921 box office smash The Sheik, the dashing hero gets the girl in the end. But the Arab world of the film is presented as exotic and dangerous.
Because it is more dangerous. In comparison to the West, that area has always been less safe. The West rests upon a mixed foundation of Greek philosophy and Roman law, meaning that the democratic state and civil law, instead of laws based upon religious doctrine, are Western ideas. The Enlightenment resulted in greater freedom, security, and civility than what's been experienced outside of Western nations, and Sharia law, compared to Western law, is a bad joke and has historically resulted in more violent, oppression, and fractured societies. So even when only comparing the distribution of justice, the West is way safer than most Arab nations. Also, what is wrong with the East being depicted as exotic? It is exotic and beautiful. You cynical twats always think the worst of people.
And the Sheik himself, the one good heroic Arab, is played by Italian-American heartthrob Rudolph Valentino. You see, since he's not really Arab, he's allowed to get the girl in the end.
Well, that is incredibly speculative. Do you have any proof whatsoever that the director actually had the opportunity to cast an Arab actor, but instead choose to take the Italian actor due to racism? I don't think you do.
If you think this kind of racist coding to signify the difference between good Arabs and bad Arabs went away with the advent of talkies, think again. Have you ever noticed how in Disney's Aladdin, the good guy might as well be a tanned American surfer dude, but the bad guys look and sound a little more, Arab? While Hollywood historically has sometimes given good Arab roles to non-Arab actors, it has also sometimes given not-so-good Arab and South Asian roles to white actors too, denying brown people work and decent on-screen representations in one fell swoop. It's basically the world's worst catch-22.
So you want Arabs to get the good guy Arab roles and not the bad guy Arab roles, since that would depict them negatively. But non-Arab actors shouldn't be allowed to be cast as bad guy Arabs either, because then they would steal work from Arab actors. So in other words, you just want Arabs in films to be cast as good guys. Are you retarded?
For example, take Mr. Habib, the scheming Middle Eastern villain in Father of the Bride Part 2, who's played by Eugene Levy.
The Habibs would like to buy the house, George. It's exactly what they've been looking for.
We've lived here 18 years. I don't know if we can get every...
Those aren't even real words he's saying to his wife. It's just vaguely Middle Eastern sounding gibberish.
Yeah, I think that's the joke. This isn't real Swedish either.
As insidious as it is to flatten entire cultures and populations into the land of squiggly writing, there's nothing so pervasive and damaging as Hollywood's tendency to constantly portray vaguely Middle Eastern people as generic terrorists. It's so common that on screen, brown skin has practically become synonymous with bad guys who have little or no character development beyond hating America and freedom fries. One of the biggest problems with this is that it erases the actual lives and cultures of Middle Eastern people and leads many Western viewers to lump all of them into the same group.
Oh, you mean like how you and your feminist friends do with men and white people? Lump us all together into one group?
White people having fun, global domination over everyone.
A group of slave-owning, women-hating rapists and racists. Is that the type of group you're talking about? Also, what if I as a white man would say, "How dare you ask me if I'll play the role of a Russian mobster? I'm not a Slav, you racist bastard." Would you stand by me and defend me against the racism of lumping me as a white person together with all other groups of white people into just one big group? Because I'm guessing that you wouldn't, because in your world, there's just this big lump of oppressive white people. And then these small, non-white people, with their unique cultures and traditions, which all shall be respected and cherished. Isn't that right?
So let's start by clarifying a few terms whose meaning has been obscured by media that paints the entire Middle East with the same broad, shallow, ignorant brush. First of all, we've done a lot of research on this, and as it turns out, words actually have meanings. Weird, right?
The amount of research needed to come to that realization must have been massive. I am thoroughly impressed.
You can't just lump Arabs and Muslims together because they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I know. That's why when you social justice warrior shitheads have been accusing me of being a racist for criticizing Islam, the religion, and not Arabs, the group of people, I get irritated by your stupidity. Islam is a collection of shitty ideas preached by an illiterate, psychotic, pedophile warlord. It's not about ethnicity or race.
Arabs are a specific ethnic group, united by culture and language, and who primarily originate from Middle Eastern countries. Arab is not, repeat, not a racial category. Got it? You can be white, black, brown, and still be Arab.
Okay, so in the case with the movie The Sheik that you bitched about earlier, about him being played by an Italian actor, not an Arab, please then do explain to me why that mattered. If you can be white and Arab, why is the Italian actor such heresy? I mean, look at these two fine-looking gentlemen. One of them is from an Arab country, and the other is an Italian. There's not a lot of difference. It's not like Mickey Rooney playing Mr. Yunioshi in Breakfast at Tiffany's. Why the triggering?
A Muslim is someone who practices Islam, a religion with over 1.7 billion members spanning a vast number of ethnic and cultural identities. But despite the fact that Islam is a religion, not a race, it's vital for us to understand that Islamophobia is racism.
Oh, I've been waiting for this. Okay, Anita. So, why would a completely rational fear of a fascist, violent, oppressive, political and religious suicide cult be racist? I'm dying to hear this.
If you've been paying attention this far, you might be asking yourself, if Islam isn't a race, then how can Islamophobia be racism? The answer lies in another ism, one many Westerners aren't particularly familiar with. That's Orientalism. In short, the term Orientalism refers to how, for hundreds of years, Western artistic and academic history has perpetuated an ignorant and prejudiced view of the East. A view rooted in the idea of Western culture as inherently more advanced and enlightened, and Eastern culture as inherently more ignorant, irrational, primitive, and often highly sexualized.
Well, apart from that shit about sexualized, which I can't really vouch for, the rest of it isn't really an image, it's true. The Middle East has historically degenerated due to several different historic events primarily focused around Islam as a regressive brake pedal for freedom of thought. As a result, the Middle East became more traditional and fundamentalist in comparison to the West, and Muslim clergy began to argue with previously rather free philosophers since their theories threatened the infallible truths presented by Allah. Long story short, the conflict between these two arbiters of knowledge set the stone in motion which hundreds of years later transformed several nations in the East which had previously been centers of knowledge into technologically stunted, intellectually stagnant, theocratic shitholes. And I do primarily blame Islam for this and not the Crusaders, since the West, due to the Reformation and Enlightenment, settled the power dynamic problem between the church and science, while within the Muslim world this hasn't happened. Today, the idea of using the Quran as a source of knowledge and as a tool to conduct scientific research with is still supported by several Arab nations, while using the Bible in the same way in the West will get your ass laughed out of any respectable university. So no, Miss Sarkeesian, before you throw out the racist card, it's obviously not about race, it's about culture, and cultures consist of a collection of ideas which are viewed by those who belong to that culture as being valuable and important. Like in the case of Afghanistan and their culture regarding family's honor. It's important to them, but it hurts people. It's cultural, but it's shit. Culture doesn't equal good. So I will never accept your nonsense about how criticizing a collection of bad ideas that ruins entire nations is racist. Islamophobia is a bullshit term used to control idiots. Criticizing bad ideas isn't racism, and it isn't irrational to be hostile towards bad ideas like those that are being spread through the Muslim faith.
Western media has contributed to a level of ignorance so great that for many people it has resulted in equating Islam with scary brown people, particularly scary brown men from the Middle East. It's been so effective that most of you probably didn't even know that this man isn't Muslim, he's Sikh.
Well, apparently most left-wing newspapers didn't know that either. You should really ask a person, by the way, who is Sikh and who is well read on his own history, what he thinks about those who are defending Sharia and its rise in the West. He might have some pretty gruesome stories to tell you about how Muslims have treated his people throughout history. Stories that contain torture and massacres.
Modern films, TV shows, and games definitely perpetuate Islamophobia, but it's no exaggeration to say that ignorant representations of people from the Middle East in Western media date back for centuries. Orientalist paintings of the 1800s were often characterized by overly sexualized depictions of daily life, and Romantic Orientalist literature of the late 1700s and early 1800s served to justify European imperialism by presenting Middle Eastern people and cultures as inherently exotic and strange.
Well, in comparison, they are exotic and strange since they're completely different cultures. It doesn't justify pillaging their lands, but in comparison to the West, the Orient is strange and is very different. Why is this so weird? Also, why are you showing images of white slaves while talking about how wrong it is to justify imperialism against Arab nations? You are ironically making it seem like these lands are savage and that it's completely reasonable for Western nations to occupy them in order to make them civil.
So there's a conflation of Arab with Muslim, and because our ideas about Islam are so deeply linked to stereotypes about terrorism and violence...
Well, it isn't really a stereotype though, is it? I mean, everything ISIS is currently doing in the East and in the West can be found reference to in the Quran. Beheadings, cutting off hands of the thief, stoning, killing gays, sex slaves. If you do a literal interpretation of the Quran, you will get violence, every time. And I dare you, provide me with any evidence that where the more literally a nation has interpreted the Quran, the more peaceful and tolerant that nation has become. Spoiler, you can't.
Both of those categories are associated with masculinity and men. While many male Muslim actors in Hollywood can only find work playing bit parts as evil terrorists, Muslim women are often erased altogether. The very real advances that Arab women have made in many parts of the world are ignored because depicting them would complicate the simplistic racist narrative about Arabs and Muslims that Hollywood continues trying to cash in on. It's almost as if we don't know how to contend with women as real people.
Oh my god, the irony. You're seriously talking about us in the West not being able to contend with women as real people? I can't. Let's just move on.
Filmmakers and TV producers know how to objectify women, how to prize them for their physical attributes and their appearance. The stories we allow ourselves to tell about the Middle East don't allow for the same kind of easy objectification of these brown women's bodies, and so we resist including them at all.
If you'd be talking about one of these women's bodies, I would understand what you're talking about, but how are we excluding yummy Arab women from our movies? You're presenting no evidence of Hollywood actively making an effort to prevent Arab women from getting parts.
At least we can thank 24 again for casting the great Iranian actor Shohreh Aghdashloo in season 4 as a Muslim terrorist who is also a wife and mother. But there are artists, critics, and writers who are out there speaking about what it means to be the target of all this anti-brown racism, and a lot of the most interesting critiques are coming from Muslim women themselves. Crap, I think I missed a call.
What kind of asshole calls you and then immediately hangs up?
I wonder if they left a message.
What's up, Anita? It's your favorite feminist Muslim Iranian American comedian calling.
So you are a Muslim who's a feminist. Is that your only joke, or do you have any more?
I was just thinking, how come in all the, like, terroristy movies, you know, the ones where brown people are in?
Or German people?
They lost themselves in the cause.
Weil sind mehr von uns drin als draußen.
And ignited a revolution around the world.
Or white Americans?
I'm doing America a favor. Is the country willing to pay for it?
Or Russians?
This is the person who controls Air Force One, the world's most secure aircraft.
What is it that you want?
We'll get to that.
You want to see a group of people who have been depicted constantly in Hollywood as being war criminals, terrorists, evil masterminds, and just any other type of scum you can imagine? Then look no further than the Russians. It isn't only the poor brown people who are being depicted as terrorists.
Why are we always, like, late to all of our, like, terroristy adventures? Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, they always have these brown dudes yelling, "Yalla, yalla, yalla." Yalla just means hurry up. It's like a thing you say when you want somebody to hurry up. Yalla, let's go. Yalla, kids, hop in the car so we could go to school and get in on some wicked adventures against Claire Danes and Homeland.
Thank you for providing fuel for the people who claim that women aren't funny.
Yo, seriously, what is up with that? Yalla in my house just meant hurry up because dinner's getting cold. Recently, during the 2016 presidential campaign, Republican candidates tossed around the phrase radical Islamic terrorism, as if it were some kind of magic spell they could use to make votes appear out of thin air.
Well, it is a growing problem in the West, so the fact that the voter wants to keep that shit out of his or her country does make perfect sense. Your condescending tone would only be reasonable if Islamic extremism wasn't a serious problem.
The only reason tactics like these have any effect is that, to so many Americans, people in the Middle East have never been established as human beings with real lives, hopes, dreams, and struggles.
Ouch. Nice dump you just took on your own countrymen, Anita. Which university professor told you that Americans don't view Middle Easterners as being human beings? The US has spent $300 billion over a period of 6 decades in total on nations in the Middle East. The US has also more recently given $4.5 billion in aid to the people suffering from the war in Syria. The US has, despite all the shit you leftists like to throw at it, not only destabilized the Middle East. I might make a video about this topic soon, but in lack of time I won't go into more detail here. I'm just going to recommend that you read David Horowitz and Peter Collier's book Destructive Generation. It has several excellent chapters debunking left-wing lies, among them being lies spread by people like Noam Chomsky regarding US foreign policy. It's well worth reading.
When almost every story you've ever seen about a particular part of the world paints the people who live there as monolithic, evil, and scary, you're a lot more likely to believe that it's actually true.
Well, this goes for all people in every country. America, for instance, gets described as being full of religious gun nuts who don't give a shit about poor people, and it's a description that you constantly keep getting fed, even here in Europe, by liberal American media, and through different movies made by certain fat hypocrite greaseballs. Just educate yourself and you're gonna stop fearing unfounded nonsense. I've educated myself, and that's why I want Islam out of the public space in Europe.
When people believe it's true, they aren't just more likely to support politicians and policies that appeal to fear and ignorance about the Middle East, they're also more likely to act on that fear and ignorance themselves. The Southern Poverty Law Center notes that the number of anti-Muslim hate groups tripled in the United States in 2016.
I'm sorry, Anita, but at this point that means absolutely nothing to me. Hate groups, according to Western Muslim activists and Muslim interest groups, is so extremely broad and vague in its definition that you get flagged as being anti-Muslim for any kind of critique against a religion. Your increase in anti-Muslim hate groups is bullshit because your definition of what you classify as being hate is bullshit. My country, for instance, is completely polluted by professional victims who are Muslim activists, and their crying about increasing anti-Muslim hate is based only upon the fact that more people are getting fed up with being told by useful idiots like you, Anita, that they're not allowed to criticize Islam.
The American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee noted the same increase after the release of patriotic fever dream American Sniper. 2016 also saw a 67% increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes.
Again, more people are speaking up about the problems that growing Muslim demographics are posing in the EU but also in the US. And if lots of people have been ball-gagged for a long period of time about attacking Islam and then suddenly just say, fuck it, I'm gonna say what I think about a concert hall full of teens being blown up by a radical Islamist, that doesn't mean that there's an increase in anti-Muslim hate crimes. Because it's worth mentioning the fact that saying something insulting about a person's faith can be considered to be a hate crime in both the EU and America, so it doesn't at all mean that there's been an increase in physical violence against Muslims, just that more people might be hurting Muslims' feelings and making them feel insulted or discriminated. Which of course isn't okay, but let's keep things in perspective here. We've had a few isolated attacks against Muslims, but they are very rare and have even been faked to try to increase their numbers. Many were also mistakenly aimed at Sikhs.
And there's no question that Trump's racist, fear-mongering rhetoric has played a part in this surge of xenophobia and violence. Of course, Trump doesn't stop with rhetoric himself. Within the first 100 days of his presidency, he has repeatedly tried to push through bans preventing the citizens of several Muslim-majority countries from entering the United States.
Being able to enter a country isn't a right, it's a privilege. It's something you earn. So if you come from a country that sponsors terrorism, don't come crying if you're not let in. The only real problem I have with this ban is that it didn't also ban flights from Qatar, since they are major financiers of terrorism, so he's being very inconsistent here.
He dropped the US military's most powerful non-nuclear bomb on Afghanistan.
Yeah, he did, and it was absolutely beautiful. That bomb incinerated almost 100 ISIS soldiers, and so far not a single civilian casualty has been found, at least to my knowledge. The bomb cleared out their underground tunnels and roasted the fuckers like the rats they are. I fail to see how that bombing in any way was a bad thing.
Now, I can already hear the army of Richard Dawkins parroting anti-feminist Twitter users typing up their responses about how Islam is a religion dedicated to oppressing women.
Yeah, because Islam constantly shows itself to be doing just that. Also, why do you think that you're an anti-feminist just because you criticize Islam's message about how they treat women? I know several feminists in Sweden who loudly criticize Islam and honor culture, but they're almost all of them non-ethnic Swedes, since ethnic Swedish feminists are a bunch of useless cowards who in some cases actually even hurt women instead of helping them.
So let's be clear. Misogyny is not a problem with Islam. Misogyny is a problem that some cultures, which happen to be Muslim, use the religion to perpetuate and justify.
Look, if I followed a religion that preaches that men and women are created equal, I wouldn't be able to use that religion to validate my shitty treatment of women, so my religion seriously wouldn't be to blame for my misogyny. But if I follow a religion that teaches that women are made for men and are to always obey their husbands, like Islam preaches, I can easily use Islam as a way to enforce my oppression of women. Islam is the problem.
Christianity has been used as a tool to oppress women around the world for millennia.
Abrahamic religions contain violence and oppression. Now that I've admitted that, they're going to mention the Crusades again, or maybe the Inquisitions or the witch trials.
Our entertainment media's insistence on constantly portraying people from the Middle East as scheming oil sheiks, slavers...
Well, if you want to see modern slavery, the Middle East is the place to go. That was a terrible example.
Snake charmers and suicide bombers, but never as real people, has real consequences.
That's the dumbest shit I've heard so far. Is that why you think people get nervous around the Muslims in Europe or in the US?
What we need now are more stories that dispel the deeply harmful stereotypes and encourage us to see people from the Middle East, whether they're Arab or Muslim or neither or both, as what they really are: human beings.
It's never been about Muslims and Arabs not being people, you simpleton. It's about disgusting and horrible ideas and values. Islam is in serious need of a major reformation if you want to be able to save any of it at all, because it's oppressive and violent, even in its most basic form. And anyone buying into Miss Sarkeesian's shit about it all being about us not treating Muslims like people, you need to read the Quran and read about the history of Islam. Because if you want to see what not treating groups of people like human beings really looks like, you need to look no further than the historic treatment of religious minorities, especially polytheists, under Islamic rulership. So in the end, the not completely unexpected conclusion of this video is that Anita Sarkeesian, once again, has no idea what the hell she's talking about. Take care.
Allah